morning, everybody. It is the Big Fat Podcast. We got the regular crew in here today, but we also have Mr. Ron Van Hoosear.
I've been here.
Hey, Ron, I've been practicing on your name. How was that?
That was perfect. That was perfect. I always tell people, just think of the Indiana Hoosiers. Everybody knows that, right? Spelt a little different, but Van Hoosear, and you got it just right.
Ah, well, great. I always try to take a good stab at people's names and everything else. So we did talk before a little bit, Ron, but and I found that we had some similarities, that we both kind of, were transplants to Montana, that we both came into to be Montanans, to out Montanan the Montanans.
Absolutely.
I actually moved here in 2007. When did you move here?
I bought here in 2016.
Oh, okay.
2016. Great. A little sooner, but yeah, or a little newer. Yeah.
What was it? What zeroed you in on where you wanted to settle down here?
Well, we came up here to visit, to just kind of check things out.
Uh-huh.
And I had a friend that I worked with, actually, who went to school in Billings and went to school in Bozeman, did some hunting in this area, had some family in this area, and he told me about it. So I came, checked it out, and loved it. Really liked it. Loved the rural nature. Loved the conservative nature.
Yeah.
And I retired early, left everything behind, and came out here.
Perfect.
Yep.
That had to be, I don't know, moving out here, it's a whole different speed, a whole different change of pace.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe for some people that would drive them crazy. For me, I did love the change of pace. I was dealing with Las Vegas, and I don't know, coming up here, it just seemed like a whole different change of pace. Was the change of pace hard for you, or did you embrace it?
No, I embraced it totally. But I'll tell you what, last place I was at, I grew up all over. Well, I grew up in Southern California when it was once rural back in the 60s and 70s.
Uh-huh.
But the last place I lived was in the Bay Area, which was absolute nuts.
Yeah.
But the cool thing was the area that I was responsible for with the company I worked for was all of pretty much Northern California, everything San Francisco, Sacramento, that line north.
Yeah.
And so
that's beautiful country.
Yeah, and I spent, I was driving about 3,000 miles a month out in the field. So I spent most of my time in the rural areas. And I lived in a great little home, old ranch home built in the 50s on a third of an acre, which there in the Bay Area was like a huge ranch.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you, as soon as I like on the weekend or something, if I had to go anywhere, just white knuckles on the wheel, and was. Yeah, didn't like it, but certainly my work week was typically out there rural.
Yeah,
and so certainly coming here, was able to do that every day, and it was good.
Do you have any kids? I don't think I ever.
Two kids. Both live out of state. My son still lives in California. He's 39.
Oh, wow.
And my daughter is 36, and she lives down in Texas. She was actually in Billings for a while, her and her husband, and they were trying to make ends meet and just couldn't get good work, and so they ended up moving down to Texas, and he found some work, and so he's down there. Yeah.
Oh, right on.
Down there.
It's kind of tough.
Just north of Conroe, or north of Houston, in the Conroe area.
Okay.
Yeah.
My daughter's down in Midland.
Okay.
Texas. So, yeah.
Went down there this past fall and visited them a little bit. That's kind of a bummer, the grandkids being so far away. My son has a child in California, and so that's obviously pretty far. Texas is a good little jaunt, but yeah.
Wow. Cody, you're kind of quiet over there. What's going on, my man?
I was just listening. I was just thinking that we're headed to Texas. My sister-in-law had moved there, and so we're headed down there, but she's moving from Houston to Amarillo, I believe.
That Texas is blown up too, like California.
Yeah. Oh, it is booming down there.
Yeah,
it's huge.
Everybody's so many people are moving toward Texas.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just for the weather.
What's going on in Texas that everybody's moving there for? I have no idea why. I just don't hear a lot of people going there.
I think freedom.
Yeah, a lot of it is.
Well, I guess that's a big one.
I have to say it's a lot bigger. It was different than I was expecting Texas to be. I mean, there's obviously the big cities.
Yeah, but there's a lot of rural.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I lived there for 7 years north of Dallas. So Dennis and Sherman by Lake Texoma, which is a huge lake. Gorgeous. It's so pretty in the spring, summer, tons of trees. So if you're going to live anywhere in Texas, the humidity's atrocious, but you get used to it. But it's gorgeous there in that area. I loved it. I loved living in there.
Our former CEO lives there, and I was thinking, I'd actually messaged him and I said, "Hey, I'm gonna be in your area. I think I might stop and say hi."
Yeah.
And anyway,
yeah.
But he lives in that area that you're talking about, and so
it's pretty.
I don't know directly. I don't know it enough to be able to specifically say it.
But even those areas, I've been told, like Denison, so much hasn't grown because it's a historic town, so they capped it. Like you can't really grow that. I don't know how that all works, but Sherman, they said you wouldn't even recognize it. It's just blown up so much.
Yeah.
But,
It's the urban sprawl there is just going nuts.
Yeah, and it was already where you leave Plano, enter McKinney, Plano, and it was just in town like that, go all the way through Dallas.
I grew up in the suburbs of Salt Lake, and it's not going back. It is a different world.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what's happening here. You look at Billings.
Yeah.
Look at it. I mean, it's exploding down there, and it's moving west.
Yeah.
All that building going on west of Billings, Park City. Here's a bedroom community. Now for Billings.
And so much of it is people moving in. It's not just the people that are growing up and hey, want to raise their kids here because they grew up here. Some of it is that, but so much of it is transplants coming in here, finding what's attractive here versus where they were. Yep. So much of that is going on, and I think in the last couple of years, when we're dealing with COVID and things like that, people are like, "Hey, I don't have to now that there's a shift at work, and I don't got to go to work. I can work from home." And we're seeing that influx here.
Yeah, I think COVID has really blown things up because of just some of the heavy restrictions in places like California, Washington that they didn't want to deal with that, and it wasn't as bad here, and so. People are coming out this way. I'm hearing people are buying houses sight unseen.
Oh, for way above asking price.
Yeah. Way above, yeah.
Right.
And my thing on that is how much of that is actually private buyers? Is that private buyers, or is that companies like BlackRock who are coming in?
Brokers and stuff coming in, right?
Who are coming in with, we're talking multi-trillion-dollar companies I'm hearing about that are coming in and actually buying up, artificially driving up the price and making it. All right, quick second here. If you find that the Big Fat Podcast is bringing you some type of value, please consider subscribing. And if you hit that little bell, it will give you a notification each time we upload a new episode. If you have a moment, maybe even leave us a review on whatever platform you're using. These little things help keep us going and help spread the word of the BFP. All right, let's get back into this.
Yep.
Very difficult for our kids growing up to buy a house now. Is it artificially being driven up?
Yeah, I've heard that where you hear about these stats about the housing sales and things like that, but I mean it was a pretty good percentage. I want to say 20%, maybe more. It's not individual families buying these homes. It's these brokers and these large companies that are buying them up, and so it's kind of not indicative of what's really happening.
Yeah. Huh. One other thing that we were talking the other day, and I thought it was kind of funny. We both moved to Montana to be anonymous. That was my thing too. I moved up here and I was like, I love this town. I love this area. And I've moved here from Las Vegas. I've had no regrets, but some things shifted for me, and I thought, you know what, to reach my goals, and honestly, to be the person that I felt like maybe I'm hiding here or something, I gotta get involved here. And so there was a shift for me, and my parents always laugh at me because they know I moved here to be anonymous. And then when I started a business, I was like, I'm starting a business in a town of, 1,800 people, so I can't just be anonymous. And it was a shift for me. But I've been thinking a lot about this. I was talking to you and you mentioned that, you moved here to be anonymous.
Absolutely.
And you have, I imagine you're in a place where you don't need to get involved. You can remain anonymous.
You're absolutely right. I came here to be anonymous. Absolutely. And, but a couple things, I think. One was I was pretty burnt out from the corporate world.
Yeah.
And I think it took me, quite frankly, this long to kind of recharge a little bit. But yeah, I came here to be anonymous, but then I started seeing things that, quite frankly, reminded me of things that I saw in California in government. And I didn't come here to to live in Montana. You know, I came here to live in Montana, to be Montanan, to integrate with the conservative values and whatnot, and I was seeing some things that really bothered me.
What are some of those things? What's the shift you're seeing?
Well, I'll tell you, whether it's local government, whether it's state, federal government, I mean, there's things happening today that are pretty frustrating. I think frustrating to a lot of people, right? And so I look at, you know, as I'm seeing things, and some of those things were, you know, we live in such a small county, right? And I see things like with the COVID money. I'm sure you heard about that with what local government did with the COVID money. They gave money to the county. They gave money to themselves. Look, I'm not saying the county shouldn't get any. However, the priority should have been on the local people, right? Those people whose businesses were shut down, right? And nothing against the county. Their paychecks were never in jeopardy.
Yeah, they weren't being told
no,
to.
but
Right,
the
exactly.
salons and different restaurants and all that were completely
You know.
shut down, had no income coming in.
And for the county to give themselves money first, I think was totally backwards. I mean, the priority should have been on the people. The county could have got some, you know, after the people who needed it most got that money, certainly. But that didn't happen, and I don't understand how that could even be remotely justified, rationalized in the least, and they tried to, and it was wrong.
Yeah,
Absolutely wrong.
I know there were some efforts to fix that afterwards. I know that there was another round of giving after that where they tried to contact businesses and whatever. We were contacted. We just we do our own thing, and we looked at it. We were like, hey, you know what? COVID, there's been challenges for our business in COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But also because of the way our business is set up, the things that we used to view as vulnerabilities became assets. And so I can't really claim that
We never had to shut our doors, and so it wasn't like we didn't feel. I know there's businesses that never had to shut the doors that got money, and I just didn't understand. Like, I get everybody was having hard times, but neither here nor in my opinion.
Yeah,
but
Right, sure.
we passed on the next round
Yeah.
where they actually contacted us because we were like, hey, honestly, like, we're okay. And we didn't lay anybody off because of COVID. In fact, we did give our people a week off in the very beginning when we thought we were going to be closed down. And then we sat back and we were like, what are we doing? We actually paid them for those days that they missed. We were
Wow.
like, hey, sorry, we don't know what's coming here and whatever. But our business did well during COVID because of the nature of our business. Whereas a lot of restaurants, a lot of things closed down. But I feel like there was a panic at times, and there was people who took a hit, and there was people who took advantage in the private sector and in government.
Oh, absolutely. There was a lot of fear out there for sure.
yeah.
But there was a lot of people who capitalized off that fear.
Yep.
You know, I don't know how many of the PPP loans, businesses that were taking that didn't need that. There was a lot of corruption in a lot of areas, not just. Yeah. Anyway, I could go on and on about that, but
unfortunately, that's part of human nature. It's sad that people do that.
yeah.
You know?
You know, I have to commend you for doing that because my cousin is super conservative, and but yet he'll maximize any of the government agency plans that are out there. Drives me crazy.
Well,
Because he's also, you know, anyway, I don't want to throw him completely under the bus.
Don't think there was enough stipulations. There was enough stipulations on taking this loan. Like, there should have been, like, your doors have to be closed, you know, like those types of things. Like, your business should have had to been, like, dramatically reduced. But there was businesses, their doors weren't closed. They were open and still took the loans.
I found it, in this case for him, you know, I found it interesting that he was buying property at the same time. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that they
so
mention.
he was investing.
Yeah, well, and you start to be like, yeah, I don't know if.
Well, you know, and that's like these businesses who are taking it who weren't really shut down and whatnot,
Yeah.
right? And, you know, it wasn't stipulated, right? Does it really have to be stipulated? I mean, come on.
You wouldn't
right?
think so,
Exactly.
but it has to,
and that's why, you know,
unfortunately.
when those giving out the money saw that this was happening, it's, okay, we got to put tighter restrictions, whatever on it.
Nah,
right?
you shouldn't have to,
Right,
but
exactly.
people
And
are-
again, but human nature, that's nature of the beast.
Should that money been made available in the first place? Is it government's responsibility to step in and bail out businesses? Now, where that comes back to is should they be allowed to shut down businesses? So is it their role to be dictating to us, this is when you can open and close your doors, and when you're suffering, we'll pick winners and losers by who we deem as essential and who gets money?
It's not their role, and I think part of it too is the government having that control over you, right? That was part of the whole deal too, was being dependent on government. Government's going to give you that money, et cetera. And unfortunately, as we talked about, it was manipulated by some and abused and whatnot. But is it government's role? I don't believe it is. No, because it gets right into what happened, and that's people are looking to the government for help. And I'm more for independence, self-reliance, those types of things first. Giving a hand up, not a hand out.
Yeah.
That's not to say that government can't help, but I think what we saw, with the abuses of it all, is indicative of maybe how they can help too much too, and is it really helping? Like yourself, again, kudos to you for what you did. But you kind of pulled up your bootstraps and you took care of business, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know every specific instance right out there, and I'm sure that there were certainly valid needs, right?
Yeah, of course.
But I think first and foremost we need to be self-reliant and independent as much as possible.
Yeah. I agree. And I guess we should mention you are running for county commission here. It's a District 2, correct?
Correct.
So at what point I know that you're starting to see these issues, and I want to talk more about what other issues made you make that decision, but really, like, what was there one thing that said, hey, I'm going to go do this, or did somebody talk you into that?
No, definitely no one talked me into it. It was something... in fact, I feel kind of ignorant. And when I first started thinking about doing this, I didn't even know it was a paid position.
Yeah, I didn't know until recently either.
Really? And then, it's a paid position. Okay. I thought it was volunteer, small county. I had no idea. But probably the one issue that got me involved or got me thinking this is not cool, and it's fairly controversial issue. It's around the museum tax. Do you recall that?
I do a little bit, but explain it.
Sure. So, first off, I'm all for history. Love history. I love studying history. Got the Bozeman Trail goes down through my property down where I've been down to Wyoming, studied the Wyoming Trail and the Bozeman Trail and the forts and whatnot. Right, the homesteads around here, the Crow Agency, all this. I love that stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And Penny over here at the museum has done a great job. That's a fabulous museum.
Yeah.
Great job. But something was up with that museum tax. And what it was a 13 mil tax, about $250,000 a year. Pretty huge. Big money, right? Big money.
Yeah.
Especially...
for this small of a county.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at... it was almost as much like road and bridge. It was a third of what the sheriff gets. It was crazy. So I went to some meetings that the Historical Society was putting out to kind of promote this museum tax. And ask questions. What do you guys need $250,000 for? Right? Well, it's to keep the doors open, et cetera. And okay. So I started looking into their income and expense. Looked at the taxes. You can get it online, right? And for like the prior 5 years or something, they had some years they'd made a couple grand, some years they'd lost a couple grand, right? In fact, one year I remember they made like $7,000, I think. Okay, but you need $250,000. Well, we might not use it all, right? Well, so it was in perpetuity too. This thing would be out there forever, right? And they're right. They didn't have to use it all. They could use what they wanted, right? But still, $250,000. It's not like they're building a new museum or anything, right? Didn't add up. And they were going to continue to fundraise. Well, okay, you guys are only, maybe making a couple grand a year. Again, didn't make it. So that was red flag number one. The bigger red flag was on the ballot itself. So this tax was going to be for residential property as well as ag property. A lot of ag property in this county, obviously,
right?
Yep.
And the ag property was so many cents per dry acre, so many cents per irrigated acre, et cetera, right? But again, lots of ag land here. There wasn't one word on the ballot about ag land. All it had on the ballot was residential. I said, it's one of these meetings. What's up? Why not? Well, the state said we had to do it that way. Okay. Don't understand it, but so I called. I called the Secretary of State's office. I talked to actually I didn't talk to him, I ended up emailing him, but got a hold of the state election director. He said, oh no, that's totally up to the counties on how those ballots are written. Oh. So I made some phone calls to the county. Nobody answered my phone calls. Trying to question what's up with this ballot, right? Of course, no answer. So again, what is up with this, right? That's a big deal. They're hiding. They appear to be hiding something, right? It seems pretty obvious that if this tax is going to affect residences and ag property, you'd have that clearly on the ballot. It's not. So that was red flag number 2. Red flag number 3 was how it even got on the ballot. If you recall, this was a special election to where this was all that was being voted on. That was it. So there was a commissioner meeting sometime around Christmas. I want to say the 20th, might have been the 23rd, that this thing got put on the ballot, and that was what they talked about to get it on the ballot. Well, who's paying attention around Christmas, right? So I'm not sure how much this thing was advertised or whatever, right? But
some very famous things have been passed around Christmas.
Yes, absolutely.
And
yes.
Yeah, and so it got on the ballot, via this meeting right around Christmas time, and it just reeked of politics. It reeked of special interest. It reeked of the things that I left in California, and I was pretty shocked, actually. And
wow.
I couldn't believe that something like that could happen in this small county.
So I wasn't aware of a lot of all this. I knew there was
nothing.
And quite frankly, I don't think a lot of people were, because it was a big push. Support history. I said, yeah, of course, let's support history. Right? I'm
we
all
love
for it.
history too. We're big both
history
buffs. We love it. So.
But what was up with that? I don't know to this day. And in full transparency, I've talked to Penny down at the museum, and we've had this discussion. It was too much. It was something else going on there, and quite frankly, I still don't have a full clear idea of what was really going on. But it just reeked of politics.
Yeah,
like people putting money someplace to put money someplace, and
I'll tell you, and again, to have it happen in the small county was very, very disappointing.
Yeah.
And so I kind of look at, in politics in general, what I'm finding, especially you see what's going on today across the country with school boards, with mayors, with county commissions. You look at what's happening in Arizona with the audit, right? They're trying to still audit the 2020 election, right? And how much the county supervisors there, they call them, they're synonymous to county commissioners, how much they are blocking things that are happening, right? And that's just the county commissioners. You look at what was happening during a lot of the riots after the George Floyd incident and whatnot. The mayor of Portland, the power that the mayor had over the federal government. The federal government couldn't come in and do ABC because the mayor said no.
But then eventually, when things got so out of control that the people that he was enabling started to turn on him, he very quickly started to look to the federal government for, why aren't you guys coming in here and fixing my problem that I've created? The place that I live, they're outside the door. So
there's the power, I guess you could say, that local government has. It's unbelievable, really, when it comes down to it with some of these things. And so, I put myself, I blame myself to a certain degree in kind of what's happened, in that I kind of fell asleep at the wheel over the years. I was working hard, head down, just trying to make ends meet, et cetera, like so many Americans are, right? Except in the meantime, so as we're trying to do the right thing, bad things are happening in politics. And so as I'm working hard, it's like, I ain't got time for that politics stuff, right? Let someone else deal with that. But, I look at it as bad things happen when good people don't get involved. And I think that the good people are working, trying to do the right thing, and some not so good people are getting into politics. And so it's like, well, hey, Ron, you have some skills and experience in your background. Rather than write letters, rather than, make phone calls, you do something. You do it. Get engaged. get
Well,
personally involved.
Man, I commend you on that because I'm one of those people who I'm like, we're heads down trying to make ends meet. And while in that mode, it's so easy to turn a blind eye to what's going on in politics because we're like, that's just negativity. And I can't have any negativity that's bringing me down right now because there's whatever, as we're in business. Life is happening. We do that. And it's usually times like this where you kind of come up for air and somebody informs you on what's going on around you. And
I was on the school board.
That's a big one.
2017 anyways. And there's a lot of stuff.
You're over in Laurel though, correct?
Yeah, in the Laurel school. And there's stuff that happens that you look at it and you're like, oh man, there's like the way you're describing this, right? They'll put it on there and they say they're transparent, but you look into that and you're like, well, you're not completely, something's up.
There's
right?
always an agenda.
There's an agenda,
right?
and then there's other people are like, well, yeah, we could have said that, but we could have done it this way. So it's not, and so in their mind, it's not that they're not being transparent. It's just a matter of trying to get it passed. And so
they're not telling you the whole story. They tell you what they want you to hear. They'll spin it, et cetera.
They make it look good and stuff.
And I was thinking the school board, but then the other side of it, what I wasn't expecting was the amount of phone calls and threats, and I mean it's amazing. And I had been when I was on the school board, that was one thing. Being the chairman of the school board, man, life. What I found is it was too hard to do work, run a business, it becomes a full-time job. I mean, even though it's volunteer, that one.
If you're going to do it right.
If you're going to do it right, you're going to be, you have to go to the meetings, you got to go to the, and then you need to speak up and then you have to field, the people's questions that don't agree with you, as well as those that do. And so then your phone is blowing up. And so I found myself in the middle of this, like, man, I don't know how much I care. I do and I don't, but I'm only allowed, I only have so much time in the day. And I commend you for doing it, and I commend you for what you're trying to do.
Absolutely, because I always find that people will get online talking day to day and complain about all these issues. They'll complain, but they're the ones, like, they don't do anything to fix it.
What's the solution?
Like, I don't complain about them, but I don't, because we're so focused on something, I don't complain. I'm just like, but then when I hear about these things, I'm like, oh my gosh, so I do. That is a great thing, is that you're seeing these issues and it's, enough that you're doing something about it. So that's huge.
And that's part of it with me being retired. Is that I do have the time now.
Yeah.
And, again, as I think I've recharged from my corporate world and what was happening there, I'm ready for the fight. Yeah, I got the fire in my belly, and
which is good for us because of all these things. That's awesome for us.
I'll tell you what. One interesting thing is that I did retire to be anonymous, absolutely, and just gonna live the quiet life down on the river, walk the dogs, go fishing, whatever, right? And one thing so now, here, very few people know me. Now I need everybody to know me. I want people to know what I'm about, right? Let them know what the options are here. And so I've been to every corner of the county. I'm out every day speaking to people, having one-on-one discussions, speaking to small groups, etc. And the cool thing is that I've met so many neat people out there. There are so many neat people in this county. I'll tell you what, I like this county before I decided to run. I like it even more now because of the people that I've met, how many people care about this county, how many people, the volunteerism. I've met with a lot of community organizations, and it's amazing. It's eye-opening. It's something that I didn't really know to the depth that it is here, but there are a lot of people who really care, and so and it's kind of put some pressure on me because I want to be able to represent that, and there is a lot more of that than I thought, and it's cool. And so regardless of what happens, if I get elected or not, I'm good. It's the journey's been good, and I find myself doing more volunteering, getting involved with some of these groups, and doing more than just walking the dog and going fishing. Hey, there's some good causes out there here locally that are pretty cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's fascinating because I too found that very similar. Wanting to move here to be anonymous, I didn't want to get to know people's drama. I didn't want. I tried to insulate myself from all of that.
Exactly.
But since I had to change my mind and perspective on that, I've got to meet a lot more people, and people do have their drama. But it has been an interesting journey. I have more appreciation now for the community, for this area. Things that I thought I was trying to avoid, it's okay. It's not a big threat, and that you're going to have the spice of life. You're going to have a little of everything. You're going to have small town syndrome in every small town. You're going to have all of that stuff. But I agree with you. There is a lot of fascinating people here, people who are natives to this area and transplants. It doesn't really matter. It is a good area, and there's a lot of very interesting people here, and it's been fun doing like our podcast and finding that. That's what we're honestly trying to do here, is just trying to get out of that environment where it's just that's our business over there, but how do we feature and focus on people who are in this area, who are go-getters and passionate about something, whether it's their art to their business to whatever it may be. And so I guess why I'm saying that is because I'm relating with what you're saying there. I get it, that you're not just saying that. That's just not something warm and fuzzy to say. It's something I have experienced as well. And
well, and it makes this position you're doing a lot easier to do it because you do care and you do see these people. And so it's like, yeah, it makes it easy to want to go and do that.
Right, exactly. I mean, I cared enough as it was to put my retired life aside and kind of put myself out there and get engaged. But then after, meeting so many of these good people, it's like...
It gives you more of a why.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it gives you your why.
Yep.
There are some other things I'm kind of thinking about, like... I know there's some other things there's a lot going on that I didn't realize a couple weeks ago. I've been, since talking to you, I find that I'm like all of a sudden all interested in, what's been going on here and there. And now once you start that conversation, all of a sudden you find out there's a lot going on.
And you get kind of angry. Like there's some things I found that was like, have made me angry. And being younger and like, I didn't put value into who's running what or what. You just don't think about it. You move somewhere and you move. It isn't until you get older that you look at people, okay, what kind of area is this?
Absolutely.
I would have never thought of that before. Now I think about that. But some of these things I've been hearing about, all this money, like it makes you angry. Like what is going on?
Well, yeah, and to me, it's like, it all comes down to, just doing the right thing. Whatever happened to just doing the right thing. I don't want to oversimplify, but so much of it could be down to that, right?
Yeah.
Rather than having a special agenda or whatever, or, representing some special interest or whatever, just what's the right thing? What's best for the county?
Yeah.
I mean, how hard is that, right?
Yeah, one of the things that I haven't really paid too much attention to, but I think it is right up your alley. I don't know how much it affects your district or not. I don't really know, but windmills coming into the county. What are your thoughts on that? I mean,
that's a good question. I have a couple thoughts. One is, so I spent 32 years in the electric utility world. So I know a lot about how the grid operates. I know a lot about the ins and outs of renewables and those types of things. So I have two thoughts, really. One is from a grid aspect, their value to the grid. There are so many federal subsidies. There's so much that are propping up these wind companies that if it weren't for that, I don't think they could be profitable. It costs so much money to build those things. It costs so much money to operate those things. If it weren't for a lot of those special perks, I don't know how profitable it'd be. And as far as what it does to the grid electrically, it's good to have that kind of very diverse sources of power, right? But wind itself is such a minuscule part of what the amount of power that goes into the grid, and the volume, the number of tens of thousands of acres of windmills that you would have to really put a dent into our grid as far as the capacitor grid is it's astronomical.
And none of it's recyclable.
Right. No.
So all that renewable energy everybody thinks is great. You can't recycle any of that.
Right. And and the amount of steel and iron that goes into building these things is it's more than the darn thing is worth, really. But having said that, it is good to have that alternative source of power. absolutely. Wind, solar, those types of things. It's good to have that, but not to the scale that they want. In California, they want to have 100% green by whatever year, right? Come on, no, that's pie in the sky, guys. You've got to have those power plants to be your number one source. And those other things, they can supplement, because even with wind, and they're getting better with wind and solar. If the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining, they're not generating, right?
Yeah.
Now they are coming up with things called stored energy systems, to where large battery systems, to where you can store some of this power, and then when it's not blowing or when the sun's not out, you can then release energy from these stored energy systems, right? But even then, that's could be some nasty stuff, because it's just big batteries, right?
Big batteries that require metals
exactly.
that are being mined in countries
rare earth
that
minerals,
are pretty
right? All that
shady.
stuff, right? We don't have
operating.
that stuff, right? Getting it from China, wherever, and so
actually, I believe a lot of it is coming out of Congo, the Congo.
Yep.
A lot of it is coming out of the Congo.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and I believe honestly too, a lot of it is coming out of there. And the problem with that is you do have some companies that are mining that stuff legitimately, but there's another certain percentage of it, and I believe the percentage is at least 30-something% of those minerals, or the things that they're mining, to cobalt, basically, to supply batteries, are coming off of black market. These are people that are just going and trying to make ends meet, trying to earn a dollar, this is legit. Like, there's kids, there's people that are not using any type of safety procedures or anything, and they're digging and mining by hand, and 30% of what is coming out of the Congo is bought from that marketplace, versus the companies that are having to be regulated and use safe practices and things that are good for people, good for the environment.
Yeah, they don't have OSHA in the Congo.
No, they don't. That is where a lot of that is coming from right now. I mean, I'm a nobody. I don't know. I'm just telling you the stuff that I read and whatever. Who knows? But I'm not a know-it-all on this type
and
of stuff.
And what about also another one about the contamination, because all of this stuff isn't recyclable. They get thrown in, and the contaminants from that contaminating the soil and all that stuff too. So
So the same people pushing this for the reasons of, hey, this is good for the environment, come to find out,
it's not so good.
It's not so good for the environment, because we got to figure out when this stuff breaks down, and it's breaking down sooner than what they were telling us it would break down.
Right.
What are you going to do with it?
Right. I mean, look at all the electric cars out there. You hear about how expensive the batteries are. Like, if you want to replace your battery in a Tesla, you're talking $25,000 or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. But up here, so the new wind farms that they're building up here north of Reed Point, Rappledge area, their battery energy storage systems, these stored energy systems, there's over 40,000 square foot of batteries.
Wow.
Wow.
That's what, that's something I've actually raised it at some meetings. It's like, well, have you considered the environmental issues? Have you considered, fire hazards? What type of fire suppression do you have up there, right? We're going to light the prairie
That's
on
a
fire,
huge
right?
thing too. Yeah, the fires.
So I don't think they like hearing those questions, but it's still it's something that needs to be considered. My understanding is that these stored energy systems that we're getting out here are some of the first west of the Mississippi. So it's still new technology, relatively new technology. It's something that isn't highly regulated because it's new. And so I don't want to say they're doing whatever they want, but they're certainly not regulated very much at this point. And so it's a concern,
How much does it cost? How much does it cost to put just one windmill up? I mean, I know it's a rough.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
There's a benefit though. Then it's got to be attractive to the ranchers. Okay, and I get that side of it. You're struggling in ranching. You're struggling with the prices of everything, and it's got to be real attractive when a wind farm comes in and says, "We're going to pay you this much per month to just to generate some power over here, and we just need access."
And that's the flip side of the story is, so on the grid side, it's arguable, that the true value, et cetera, when you look at the materials and all that stuff, what it's doing to our environment, et cetera, right down the road. But in the near term, certainly for these ranchers, that their ranches are for sale, they haven't been able to sell them. The farming's not good, etc. Ranching's not good. This is a boom, and these guys want it. And okay, myself as a county commissioner, this is something that they want. This is something that's good for the county, and that's something where the contracts that we have with these wind companies. Is still yet to be seen, but they're supposed to make it better than it was when they do leave, right?
Right.
And we'll see.
Yeah.
But that's the intent, is that they do that.
Well, I think part of the risk here on that too, though, is I get it. It's if I owned a big piece of property and somebody came to me and said, I'm going to pay you this much per month to park these things here, and it's going to add value to my property and my resale value at some point that I have this on there and everything else. That would be super attractive. But I'm kind of concerned by what this takes away from Montana, as in how it affects the wildlife. I moved up here, and every now and then I find that I'm not noticing how good the air smells. I got to tell you, for 2 years, at least for 2 years, I would just be driving in the evening time in the spring or the summer, any time of year, honestly, and I would stop with my kids. I'd be driving, and I'd be like, do you guys smell that? Do you still smell it? Like, the way this place, like, the way just the mountain air, the rivers, the this and then that, and the things that I now take for granted because I've been here long enough. Part of that, though, was, oh my gosh, look at that bald eagle. Look at that osprey. Like, we didn't have these things down in the desert and Southern Nevada.
Exactly.
Okay, so every now and then I'm like, I find that I'm kind of like, so these deer get out of the road. It used to be like, oh my gosh, kids, look, there's a deer. Like that was a good 2-3 years at least. But I'm concerned about is with these windmills coming in here. Is yes, it's a boom for the landowners, but what is that doing to our Montana as far as a lot of these large birds have not developed, they've not adapted to this thing that, I don't know, how high are these windmills, 100-something meters?
Yeah.
They're up there, and this thing's swinging around, and I know from what I've been reading and what I've been studying, it's taking a large number of our large breed birds out of the air, and that's having a long-term impact. There's a balance here between what those birds do with the animals that are on the ground, and in this, you do one thing that affects the bees, and the bees that affects this, that affects this, that affects this.
Insect swarms too.
Yeah.
I heard insect swarms when they go and swarm and move too is another one too.
Yeah.
That
we've got geese, we've got all these things, and I know that they are supposed to be counting what kind of impact that has in a certain area. They do, but a lot of times things are happening where birds are being struck that fall outside of the counting area. So the real counting number is not as accurate as what they would lead us to believe.
No, it never is.
On the impact of
Yeah.
what these things are having. They're gonna take the kindest numbers to themselves when they're trying to pitch putting these things into an area.
And when you talk about the bald eagles, for instance, I know that there's some of these wind companies that are getting fined because bald eagles are protected species, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yet they're killing the bald eagles. So how does that work, right? And so they're
Right.
actually getting fined. Not that that's going to solve the problem, but they're finding that, oops, we're killing a protected species. That's not good. Yeah.
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 And those large bird species they don't reproduce as quickly, as reliably as
like
smaller
Little
species.
bluebirds and stuff.
Little
yeah.
sparrows or things like that. I know people will say, oh, well, we have to absorb some kind of, we're going to have to be realistic here. Birds get killed by cats all the time, but the smaller species of birds reproduce much more rapid.
And isn't it funny, though? It's the hypocrisy of what we were just kind of talking about. Those same environmentalists who are pushing for wind and pushing, et cetera. But, okay, what about the batteries and what do you do with those and stuff, right?
Yeah.
The same environmentalists are pushing for wind, yet we're killing our birds, et cetera, right?
Yes.
And it always comes down to big money. It's money.
Yeah.
And
It's just because it's the hypocritical. It doesn't make sense. You can't be an environmentalist and be like, oh, this is okay, but this isn't. It doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
They're coming up. They're going up all over the place, though. And when we have the one just right outside of Rapple J, right out here, between Reed Point. You got the ones over in Big Timber. There's a
Yeah.
huge windmill going up over in Carbon County.
And I don't know if you've heard
Towards the Wyoming line.
up there outside Broadview. That one's coming, and that one's huge, I guess. So there's going to be some on the Yellowstone County side, and that's kind of more going to be solar. But there's like a $1 billion project coming on the Stillwater County side, wind.
Jeez.
So
And they're so expensive to make and produce. It's like it takes a long time to reinsee in that investment to where you actually are even making anything
get
of
that
it.
return.
To get that return, I guess.
And that's where, again, I think it's the politics that's driving it.
It's
But
just
wind
money.
itself, like I said, I don't think it'd be very profitable if it weren't for all the federal subsidies, all the support and the props that they're getting.
Which all
for
comes
that
from us
industry.
anyways.
Right. and the sad part is, like I said, what's it doing for the grid? Not what you think it is.
Yeah, and just those subsidies. That's where we go back to government and government subsidies. Who is lobbying for this? Who's actually benefiting on this on a they call them sustainables, but they're more like unreliables because the technology is not there where they're producing power, energy dense solution consistently, and I think that's what's being sold here. But I think there's more of like you say, there's some money changing hands.
Oh yeah,
and typically the environment or the climate or whatever they want to claim or the wildlife that they're saying they want to protect. That's really, in the long term, that's, I feel, who's going to take the brunt on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to do this experiment for a long time, and eventually they're going to have all these big windmills that they're going to have to take down. And because it was an emotional reaction, we have to be doing something. This episode is brought to you by BFL Sauce. That's right, BFL Sauce. It goes great on everything. Let's just take a quick moment and let you know you can go to our website, bigfatlunchbox.com, and you can order BFL Sauce by the bottle. We ship it out to you. And now, if you order over $25 on the website, you just get free shipping. Why? Because we know firsthand shipping is expensive. It's expensive for all of us, okay? But we just try to figure this out to where you can order more affordably to get the sauce you love, to put on the food you love. And those sauce sales directly support the Big Fat Podcast. If you would like to help produce the Big Fat Podcast, there is a spot right there where you can contribute to become a producer of the Big Fat Podcast. Check that out on the website, bigfatlunchbox.com. All right, let's get back into this. Well, that something is typically not really what the answer really was. And I mean, we could go all back into a pandemic. We can go back into a lot of things where we have to be doing something but we're actually going through the motions and we're not really addressing the real problems here and who's really benefiting off of these things.
I'm a nuclear guy myself.
That was my next question because I have been looking at nuclear, and
I've been involved in nuclear power since I was 17 years old.
That's right. I did read your website, and I don't know why I didn't think about that, because I did. I was going to ask you, well, then what are your thoughts then on nuclear?
I was on a nuclear submarine, transitioned to the electric utility world. I worked at 2 nuclear power plants. And, it's clean. It's very reliable. It's relatively cheap. When nuclear first came out back in the 50s, the thing was it's too cheap to meter, right? Well, that never really happened, but politics, I'm sure. But it's a good source of energy. But the politics of it, it depends on how you spin it, right? I mean, 50% of the power, or more than 50% in Germany and France, used to be nuclear power. But they've since been shut down. A lot of them had shut down because of the politics, right? Here in the United States, it's been a while since I've really looked, but back in the 2000s, there was over 100 operating nuclear power plants in the United States. Hadn't built one since the 80s. There are a handful that are being built now, things like Chernobyl and Fukushima, which was the accident they had in Japan here a number of years back. Didn't help any. But the only thing that I have against nuclear is what do you do with the spent fuel? Okay, what do you do with the waste? We have, and this is again politics, Yucca Valley, Nevada. They built and completed, or it's at least almost complete, if not fully complete, a place to store spent fuel, right? Well, it was shut down due to political reasons. It's empty. It's not being used, but it's done for all intents and purposes. And, the whole deal was moving fuel, like they take it by rail, spent fuel by rail, right? And, oh, no, the media telling you, how bad it is and everything, right? Well, I mean, it's pretty darn safe. I've seen videos to where they put these spent fuel rods in these concrete sarcophagus.
Yeah, they're completely encased.
Right.
Yeah.
And where they have launched old F4s, old jets, fuselages on a rail, they launched it into these things and not a crack in them, right? And yet people are okay with who knows what chemicals and things are going down the railways, right? You see these chemical cars.
Yeah.
Who knows what's in those things going right? No one says a word. I worked in Louisiana. The nuclear power plant there, they could care less about it. It was back in the woods, can't smell it, can't see it. It's all fine, right? Because there was so much petrochemical down there. All the petrochem facilities just reeked. You could smell the paper mills, and you have these huge containers of who knows what chemicals with a chain link fence, and then you have this hardened nuclear power plant, and everybody's up in arms about it, right?
Yeah.
Just having worked in it for so long, it can be a very safe.
And the waste from it is very minute. Am I right in thinking that it's
relatively speaking, sure,
compared to like all the other renewable?
Right.
There's not as much as you would say. Oh, windmills, broken down, and what are we going to do with that?
Completely.
Yeah. And like with Chernobyl, now I'm gonna say, like, I watched Chernobyl, the HBO. I believe it was.
I
series.
did too. Yeah. Whoa.
Oh my gosh! By the time I was done watching that, I was just like, this is awful. This is the worst thing. But then more and more you read about it and other things and how they blew that up, because there's not as much money to be made in the nuclear as there are all these other.
That's right.
Is my thinking of it all.
Yep.
So by the time all your solar and your windmills, there's so much more money that people have their money pockets in than if you were to just put out these nuclear, because it takes so much less than it does all this other stuff. So the money is the big factor.
Right. Money.
But
Well,
the waste on it isn't as much as
what we are all led to believe. I think
I mean,
the propaganda behind it all, if you want to say.
So right now, because they can't send the fuel to Yucca Valley, or Yucca Mountain, I can't remember, Yucca Mountain, they're all storing it on site. Every utility has to store their waste on site now.
Which, is that really a problem?
Again,
because the amount of land that it takes to generate that much power in nuclear, if you compare that to how much land does it take if you were to generate that same amount of power with solar and wind, I believe the statistic is something like 440 times more land is required. 440 or 425 times more land.
We're talking states.
Is required for that much power versus a nuclear facility. Right. So if they just had the ability to store that and they had a little bit more land, I think right now all of the nuclear waste that's been generated thus far can be stored, and this is according to Michael Schellenberger, who's also running for governor of California right now, but I was reading some of his stuff. He claims that the spent fuel rods, it's something like the size of a football field, 70 feet high. That would contain all of the nuclear spent rods. All of the nuclear waste would be contained in that that we have so far.
Right. And exactly, and that was the point, with them all storing it on site. It's relatively a small amount.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing compared to all these windmill farms that are going in and solar.
And here's kind of the other political thing. So in California, right, so many, 100% green energy by whatever year, right?
Yeah.
The utility I worked for had a ton of hydroelectric, right? That's pretty green, I think, right? No emissions, right? They did not count that as green power. Even though we had, thousands of megawatts of electricity being generated by hydroelectric power, it was not considered green. Is that politics or what?
Yeah, how is that? Well, how do they justify that?
Yeah, that's crazy.
We had one of the largest, if not the largest, pump storage facilities. You know what pump storage is?
Yes. because aren't they? They're going to pump it back uphill, correct?
Right. So
Is
they
that what
have
you're talking
a
about?
lake at a high elevation.
Correct.
It drains down through the turbines
To turn it. Now they're
Right.
going to pump it back
and
up
then they
there to
pump it
reuse
back up at night when the
Yeah.
power usage is low. Right.
Yes.
That's not green power, even though there wasn't a carbon atom emitted, right, from
Huh.
that.
That's
Is that
interesting.
politics or what?
Yeah. How do they?
Yeah, that's
how are they
politics.
justifying that?
Yeah.
I mean, how?
That's what the politicians say. That's how.
Well, usually you dig deep and you figure out where are those politicians getting
and-
funding from, and you
Yeah,
find
there's your
out
answer.
Exactly, and it's the spin. It's what the media puts out, and it's
because
that's where you got to do your research.
right.
Got to
And-
do your research.
Yeah. When you find out that, when you go look at governors of California and you look at what was going on there, why were they anti-nuclear? Why were they going toward all these green industries that weren't going to? And I feel like they knew this is that a lot of this stuff was not going to be achievable with the unreliables or the sustainables. You look at some of the money that they were bringing in through Indonesian oil. When you talk about Jerry Brown's father, they were actually bringing in a lot of money. Their family, they were actually bringing in a lot of money in Indonesian oil. And this is why Jerry Brown, I'm finding out, was so anti-nuclear. They were trying to shut down Diablo Canyon because of all the oil that they were bringing in. So when you start looking at, and then when you look at, okay, well, who did Jerry Brown appoint to these positions and these positions? And you figure out, well, this judge who got appointed, was Gavin Newsom's dad. So all of this has been kind of kept in there very closely of why do these guys all keep doing these same policies? And a lot of these guys have all been making money off of other industries while they're promoting these other things. Like here's a real solution. And who are the groups that are attacking nuclear and putting out the propaganda? Because most of this is fear-based. When you actually come down to it, what I have learned is that literally like 100 people in the history since we've had nuclear have died as a direct result of nuclear power. When you look at all of the coal-related industry, direct deaths directly tied to the coal industry, or the oil industry, or all of these other things, nuclear is historically safer.
Oh, much.
Fukushima, like 1,600 people died during the evacuation that they're now looking back and saying, you know what, that evacuation was actually unnecessary. We panicked. People panicked. People died during the evacuation. That actually very few people actually died as a direct result of radiation spill.
Right. Exactly.
There. Same thing at Chernobyl. Very few people actually, not that that's not a bad thing or sad thing,
Yeah.
it is. We're going to have accidents that happen, but Chernobyl, we actually had very few people actually died. Whereas there was so much fear afterwards that pushed over the calculations are somewhere between 150 to 250,000 babies were aborted the next year because people all across Europe, women all across Europe, were told that your baby is going to absorb this radiation and be born with all kinds of problems. Whereas, yes, there were like 25 firefighters and
that were directly had it all, in the water.
They picked it up or whatever.
But the fear and the propaganda caused so many more things, more problems.
Look at TMI, 3 Mile Island, right?
Yes.
How many people died there?
Not that many, and I've been reading
Right,
on that.
exactly, and it was the post fear,
Yes.
right? That and look what it did to the nuclear industry.
Yes.
After that happened, no nuclear power plants were built for I don't know how many years. In fact, none have been built. There are a handful, I believe, that are starting to be built in the east.
Yeah.
But
I think we're down
for
to
all
like
intents and purposes, it shut the industry down. And what happened? Nothing really. It was contained. The design of the plant, the containment building, did what it was supposed to do. And the sad part, it was operator error that caused that whole thing. You look at Chernobyl.
Yep.
Operator error.
Yep.
And it's these human error things. And the thing is now that the designs of nuclear power plants that they have now, typically the design back in the 80s was have these mega plants. They were 1,000 megawatts, 1,100, 1,200 megawatt units, huge, right? Today, they have these units that are 500, 600 megawatts, all passively cooled. In other words, you don't need active cooling systems, power to these pumps to cool them. It's they have passive designs. They're inherently safer, and in my opinion, they were quite safe before, but they're even more safe now.
The technology is
Right.
just better.
And-
We've learned from some things.
Right.
And wasn't it with Chernobyl, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it was because of the equipment or the stuff they were using was just cheap.
But that was a big part of it.
And so then once Chernobyl happened, they had to go in all of Russia and replace all that faulty, cheaper equipment to
right,
make it
yeah.
up to standards.
And they didn't have containment buildings because it was expensive.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
So
And a lot of that expense was a problem because they were in a Cold War with the U.S. and there was a lot of ego involved there. The problem could have been addressed quicker, faster, if there wasn't
but in all
Cold
reality,
War-related
yeah.
politics involved.
Right.
That could have been contained.
But they also got Chernobyl. I mean, they made it happen fast. Once that happened, I mean, they got it shut down and everything. You know, I mean, it was a terrible situation, and that series that made it look awful. Like it was. Oh my gosh, the whole world was about to die.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the feeling you got after watching it, and they did an amazing job with the filming and the very coldness of it, but. It made, after I watched it, I was like, nuclear is awful. It's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, but how much of that is...
Yeah, but then once you read, and hear about other things, and you're like, oh, okay, that was a total, lack of a better word, propaganda spew to make people think like, oh, this is terrible. We don't want this.
Yeah, it was bad, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, the things that drove to where it is, all the way from the design of how they designed their plants, cheap,
Yeah.
right, to the human error that happened and the pressures that were on these operators to do what they did.
Yes.
Those are things that I 100% believe would not happen in the United States. It's a highly regulated. The NRC is onerous on how they regulate that industry, and today. The things that we have learned, I think that it should be an option on the table, and someday it will again, I think. But when that's going to be, I don't know.
I think there's going to be a large amount of educating that has to be done because, honestly, through the 50s and 60s and 70s, as the technology was getting out there, I feel like there has been a lot of miseducation or almost,
Absolutely.
and a lot of propaganda to where
Absolutely.
people are afraid of it. Movies portray it as the worst thing ever, and we could go into all kinds of different things where how nuclear is portrayed, but I feel like it doesn't get the backing it should have from the American people because of most of us are uneducated.
Right.
Honestly, it's not been in the last year or two. I started to get into watching. I love watching like TED Talks. I've been watching a lot of things on people who are talking about nuclear, and I'm like, because what's going on there? What do I not know about that? And it has been eye-opening. I have been trying to get caught up on some of that stuff. I am trying to figure out what's going on with the climate and how much of that is, are we succumbing to more fear campaigns, or who's benefiting off of that?
Absolutely.
What is man-made? What is not man-made? What is natural? I have been trying personally to try and figure that out, just so.
And kudos to you for doing that research. I lived that nuclear world. I've been inside reactor compartments. I've been inside spent fuel pools. I've been in these radiation areas, et cetera. I worked
And you're not
there,
glowing.
Exactly. It's
I haven't noticed a glow.
You
again,
still have all your
it's-
hair.
They're
and-
not going to send you into these places, you shouldn't be and whatnot. It's
Well, thinking about the nuclear submarine thing, like how many years now have we had guys underwater living in a capsule with nuclear power?
exactly. It's
That's a
been
great
the Nautilus came out in the 50s. I want to say 57, maybe earlier, but anyway, mid 50s ish. Since we've been out there punching holes in the water, nuclear subs. Yeah.
And those
So almost
subs,
70 years.
right? They were cruising around on the same nuclear rods that they had. They don't that power lasts, and it lasts longer than the years that they're like, this is going to power this sub for this many
yeah.
years. But
Oh,
they
yeah.
typically are getting 20, 30 more years out of that
Yep.
than what
Yep.
they were initially projecting. Is that correct?
Yep, they're yep, and and it's not only the subs. We have nuclear surface ships, nuclear aircraft carriers. All of our aircraft. Well, I take that back. I don't want to say that. Most of our aircraft carriers are nuclear now. I think there's still some conventional ones still out there, but So you're looking at not just submarines, but we have huge reactors on carriers, the Nimitz-class carriers, for instance. Huge. You know, the first nuclear carrier, the Enterprise, had 8 reactors on it.
Wow.
You know? Yeah. So, it's something where it's how it's spun. It's how it's communicated. Again, I lived it. And so, I may be biased, but again, I'm not sitting here glowing. I'm doing fine. It's a safe industry. It can more than adequately provide power to this country. And as I said, in Europe and in Germany, France, and others, more than half of their power was nuclear power. And yet today, now you look at Germany, how dependent they are on Russian oil because they shut their darn plants down because of political reasons. It's not because they weren't feasible or operable.
Yeah.
It was politics.
Isn't France they're still running a lot of nuclear?
They still are. And I don't know the exact percentages anymore, but, the political pressures have shut. Look, you look in California, San Onofre. That thing was shut down way before its time. They're trying to shut down Diablo Canyon right now. They're due to shut down here, and I think in a few years. It'll be interesting to see if they do.
And what's also been interesting about that is the different groups and environmental groups who are really pushing to shut those things down. They're taking money from fossil fuel industry.
Mm-hmm.
So, because
it's crazy.
Because who benefits? Yeah. Fossil fuel industry knows that wind and solar are not at a position, they are not technologically at a point where it's a viable threat.
They're not going to seriously compete, right? Exactly.
Correct. And honestly, fossil fuel's giving money to them too. They're like, whatever, we'll play in that area too. But they can't compete against how efficient and economically efficient also the nuclear industry is compared to the fossil fuel industry. And I'm not anti-fossil fuel, but I'm anti the hypocrisy of all of the politicians and the groups that are behind the scenes doing this and that.
Making the money off of it. That's the frustrating part.
Yeah,
what's interesting to me is Schweitzer, back in, was that 2004 to 2012?
Okay, our governor here.
Our governor, he was huge on wind power. And he was anytime he spoke, he would just speak on wind power. And we're seeing a lot of wind power coming from what he was doing, 15 years ago, from what he was, trying to help encourage that. So it's an interesting conversation just with what we're having in regards to solar and wind and what's happening because, for the last 20 years, really, it's coming up on 20, we've been told as Montanans that wind power is kind of brings jobs to the economy. It's going to be the big switch, to help Montana and bring employment as well as opportunities to not only the ranchers, but all of us. So it's interesting to have the conversation of knowing that it really isn't going to be as big as we think it is or have been told it is.
Yeah, and I think we're going to feel the negative effects of it just as it's taken long to ramp up and have all of that here coming in now. It's going to take a long time before we learn that lesson that, hey, this big experiment, I feel like places like California, they're figuring it out when they've got broken down solar fields, and broken down, I drove truck all over California. I just drove through tons of those wind farms, and I think California has been figuring out that, okay, this isn't as good or as efficient or as reliable as we thought it was going to be. It's not going to help this is why they're still experiencing brownout season, correct?
Absolutely.
And they have to go and clear those lands too of vegetation, of animals, of
when I was a
tortoise.
We were told don't pick up you get fined this much money if you pick up a desert tortoise when I was a kid. That was a big shift, right? I mean, I always had one in my backyard as a pet, and then all of a sudden it was like, don't touch one of these or you're going to prison for life and a $5,000
or that
fine.
Three-toed salamander, don't touch it.
So all these habitats are getting cleared out because of these. And
but when they put in those wind farms, they had people out there scooping up desert tortoise all of a sudden and trying to move them. Come to find out, they don't move so well. Like, they don't relocate so well. Killed tons of the desert tortoise.
Oh, really?
I didn't tons of the desert tortoise. Yes.
They don't relocate as well?
No, they need to be left. If you're going to leave them alone, we were all told to leave them alone.
Don't touch them.
Leave them alone.
Do their thing.
But when they're coming through there with a dozer to clear land, to put up solar farms and wind farms, They're just destroying habitats. So I don't buy the hypocrisy.
Yeah, it's the environmentalists are all about save the animal, but then yet we're good. It's just, yeah.
Well,
Anyway.
it's about where the money is, right?
Yeah.
And I feel
Politicians.
states like California, they've been learning these lessons, and some of them are open about it, and most of them aren't.
So.
But
It's got to get exposed. The people have to.
But that's
have
the
to
thing
see
is
it.
exposing it
Right.
and getting it out there, because everything is so hush hush, and obviously the freedom of speech has kind of went down, a lot went down. So it's hard to actually get the truth out.
So okay, let's take the windmills, since that's a big thing here, right?
yeah,
When you drive by these things, you see cows in the pastures with the windmills.
okay.
You know, like I've been the north out here by Rappeljay. I've been out there. You go up there by Judith Gap. You've got the ones out in Big Timber. We've been there. You've got the ones over in Bridger, just outside of Bridger, that are they've been putting those up for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that there's still wildlife around that. Now, I'm not saying that I saw an eagle sitting on one of them things. I'm just saying that you see animals that are adapting to those. So it's interesting. It'd be interesting to know how much of, the habitat, and the one out in Bridger, I just happen to be, we drive by there a lot because we have family out in Wyoming, just across the border. And, all of that is state land that they're putting that on. So it is hunting ground. I don't imagine you can hunt there anymore, so you're not going to be shooting on it. So it is interesting to me to think about how is that affecting.
What are going to be the long-term effects?
What are the long-term effects on that when it comes to the wildlife?
Yeah.
Because you're right.
I think certain parts of the wildlife adapt to it, and I think certain aren't going to and haven't been able to and aren't going to be able to. And we're going to figure out in a few years how that threw everything off. How does it throw the ecosystem off when it's affecting the birds?
Well, and what about like
And
the
how
salamanders and the stuff on the ground?
How do those all work
bulldozing
together? How does that all work in balance? And when we mess with
And
that,
the insect swarms.
yeah,
I don't like bugs, but they do stuff.
Yeah, they do stuff. They play an important role, and they're
and
finding.
you got bats, right? The bats that go out and eat the insects. So then it's going to affect.
Well, it
those.
affects bats. So it affects the bats are getting taken out of the air. But there's also a buildup of the insects on those big, huge blades. That's a factor. So as those insects are getting smacked in the air by those big blades, you actually have a less of energy efficiency with those windmills because there's drag on those big blades.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and I'm not sure what kind of maintenance they do on those things, but yeah,
I don't know.
I'm not doing that. That's scary.
That would be. I have an
That's super
uncle
scary.
Through marriage, so it's a second marriage from my aunt. Anyway, that's beside the point. But that's what he does. They
blades?
fly him all over. They fly him all over the world. I mean,
God.
so she's she's posting.
Secondary industry right there, right?
Yeah. It's crazy. Well, and I don't think there's a lot of people that do it, but I mean, he does more than just clean the blades, But that's literally. I mean, one week they're in South America, and the next week they're in Germany. It's crazy.
And the thing about those secondary industries is once those get really going, now we can't lose those jobs. Those are a part of the economy. So once we get too far down a road that we shouldn't have gone down in the first place, it's really hard to come back. Don't get me wrong. I've talked about it with April. I'm like, I'm ready to go spend $30,000 on a drone and go do inspections for wind farms. Like there's a secondary industry. I'd rather do that than get up at midnight. So I really would.
And you don't have to climb
understandably
anything
so,
that
right?
high.
Well, and now they have them that the drones can go out, and when they start to lose signal or notice that it's getting weak, they come back to you.
No, they come back, they land. I could sit there and I've looked into it. Don't get I mean, don't get too cozy that breakfast burritos are always going to show up because at a certain point this midnight thing is tough. Okay, but in the end, it's real attractive to people to get into those secondary industries that support these other things, but. I don't know. I think in the end, it just makes it harder to come back from a poor policy decision.
You get so far down that road, and
and down that road, you got people that have been benefiting through corruption and money changing hands in ways that it shouldn't be. And I I don't know.
Hey,
I think
let's
people
just put that nuclear power plant with a small footprint out there.
Very small footprint.
There you go.
I love the view of the mountains. I love the view of the crazies. I like the view of, whatever.
Yeah.
And very quickly here, all over Montana,
Who wants to be looking at a bunch of windmills?
yeah, somebody who lives someplace else is benefiting off of our view of our mountains being taken away because we have windmills all over the place.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I feel like we shouldn't be undercutting our brothers out there to the east, at their coal plant out in I'm losing the name of it.
Cold strip.
Coal strip. We shouldn't be allowing people back east to make decisions that shut these places down while we are exploring actual energy solutions that are economical, good for the environment, zero emission. There's so many positives to it. It's ridiculous.
Even with these fossil fuel plants, I mean, hey, nuclear, I think, is unfortunately it's still probably a ways in the future in reviving that. But heck, just a nice gas plant. Coal emissions have been cleaned up, astronomically from the day.
Yeah.
They're relatively clean, and just put that power plant out there. It doesn't have to be nuclear, but those power plants are an important and integral part of sustaining our grid out there. And solar and wind, they're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
Outside of, again, how many hundreds of thousands of acres, right, to get, put a blip in how much goes into the grid.
And then
right?
there's your food source, land getting taken away for crops. And it's
Wow, we could just keep going on this. It's an interesting subject, and it's weird. I never thought I would get interested into nuclear and all these things, but
I learned a lot today, actually, just talking about it.
And I kind of feel bad because I feel like there's a whole bunch of other questions I want to ask you about, like your position on a lot of things. But so we're going to wrap this up here. You're running for county commission, and that it's a primary in June, correct?
June 7th, yeah. Mail-in
June
ballots
7th.
actually go out May 13th, and I just found out that like 50% of the ballots are mail-in.
Really?
This year. So May 13th is, I guess, just as big a date as June 7th.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's interesting. So, well, I appreciate you coming and taking the time to let us get to know you, because
Thanks for
I
having
didn't
me.
know you. When I got a text message and saying, hey, I'd like to get to know business owners and what your issues are in this area, and I was like, I don't know this guy.
Who is this? What?
Who is this guy? And I was like,
another politician, right?
well, no, I just didn't know you, and I thought, typically we know a lot of people around here. Actually, I rely on April. She keeps me in the back. I just cook, but she gets to see everybody at the window, and she knows everybody. She's from here. And and I was like, when I asked April, and she was like, I don't know him. I was like, what? This is a wild card. What do we have going on here? So it's been good to get to know you, and maybe we can do this. Maybe we can do this again, because I feel like I have a lot of other things I would like to ask you about and pick your brain on.
Love to chat.
And just to get out more information to the community, and so people have that resource of getting stuff out.
Yeah,
it's
and
great.
honestly, it's not our district and things like that. I actually have reached out to the other guy who's also running, and it's always an option for anybody. We don't pick.
We just want to get the information.
We just
out.
want to get
Absolutely.
any
That's it.
information
Absolutely.
out. This
Yep.
isn't about
It's not what we
picking
think or
sides
what
or-
we want. We just want to get the
No.
real information out.
we
That's
just
it.
want to have conversations and share that with the community and provide a platform where that can happen. So anyway, that's how that works there. So thank you so much for spending this early hour with us here at the Uncle Sam's Complex here in downtown Columbus. Cody,
I totally enjoyed it. It's been a great time.
Thank you so much for having me.
awesome. We'll do this again soon.